Hello everyone, back with yet another deck tech. This time it's going to be Maelstrom Wanderer, who is a blue, red, green ramp control deck. So, as it always goes, let's first talk about the commander here. Maelstrom Wanderer cost 5 blue, red, green. It's a legendary creature elemental. It's a 7/5, and it has the ability creatures you control have haste and cascade. The way Cascade works is when you cast a spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost, put the exiled cards on the bottom in a random order, then do it again. So essentially, the idea of the deck is to play a bunch of mana acceleration through artifacts or spells, and then eventually hit our magic number of 8 mana and cast Maelstrom Wanderer. That is the entire plan of the deck. This deck was pretty popular with 30 life uh, before the rules change, but I haven't seen a lot of it doing super well at events online recently. But I still think the deck has game for sure, and it just requires you to build a little bit differently because now you can't lean on 30 life to sort of cushion you against the aggro decks. You need to actually play dedicated cards for the matchup, and you need to become a little bit more threat light and play some more accelerants so that you draw multiple in a game to really bring your game plan together. So the first thing we'll talk about is the threats of the deck, the creatures. Um, the first one we have, um, before I do that actually, so the vast majority of cards in the deck are going to be cheaper than Maelstrom Wonder, so that whenever you're cascading, you're not going to be put into awkward situations where you are cascading into stuff that you can't cast. But another downside or a side effect of Cascade is that you're not generally able to play a lot of counter spells in your deck because they do not play well with Maelstrom Wanderer. Cascading into them is like cascading into a dead card. They don't do anything when you cascade into them. So that also puts another deck building restraint on the deck. But anyways, on to the creatures. The first one we have is Dragon Lord Tarka, which for 5 red green is a legendary creature, Elder Dragon, 8/8 flying trample, and when Dragon Lord Atarka enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers your opponents control. So this is just a very big threat all on its own. 8/8 is gigantic in the format, and it also is a board clear. It kills a lot of creatures in the format, and against aggressive decks, if you're ramping out into Dragon Lord of Tarko or you cascade into it, you're going to be able to kill a lot of creatures. Generally, you're going to be able to kill 2 to 3 creatures with it, and other times against creature lighter decks, uh, you get to uh, kill off planeswalkers, which is also sweet. Frost Titan, we're playing basically all the Titans in the deck that we have access to because they're extremely good with Maelstrom Wonder. If you cascade into them, not only are you getting their enter as the battlefield trigger, but you're immediately going to be able to trigger it again by attacking because Maelstrom Wonder gives them haste. So that's just some very nice synergy. Frost Titan is often called the weakest Titan, and it's because its ability isn't super powerful at locking games up all by itself in terms of stabilizing you early, instantly winning the game when it comes into play, or having a super duper fast clock. But what it does do is it allows you to really beat up on decks that want to have a singular threat because its ability is when Frost Titan enters the battlefield or attacks tap target permanent, it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So if your opponent's plan is to have a really big flyer or something, you can just tap it down and keep it locked down for the rest of the game while your Frost Titan kills them. Its static ability is whenever Frost Titan becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless its controller pays 2. So essentially, it makes your opponent pay an additional 2 for any kill spells that would target Frost Titan or basically anything that would interact with it, which is super nice. A card I'm trying out is Godo Bandit Warlord. For 5 red, it's a legendary creature, human barbarian, and when Godo Bandit Warlord enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an equipment card and put it onto the battlefield. If you do, shuffle your library. And then its other ability is when Godo attacks for the first time each turn, untap it and all samurai you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So there are no other samurai in the deck, and there's only one equipment in the deck, but that equipment is Batterskull. And Batterskull is a 5 cost equipment with living weapons, so when it enters the battlefield, you put a 0/0 black germ creature token onto the battlefield, then attach Batterskull to it, and the equipped creature gets +4/+4, has lifelink and vigilance. And then it also has pay 3, return Batterskull to its owner's hand, and equip for 5. This is basically a creature. It's super resilient to removal because you can pay 3 to return it if the germ is killed and then replay it for 5 and just keep going. Uh, it is just with Godo, it's essentially like you got a 3/3 and a 4/4 that is super resilient for one card. Another thing to note is that with Maelstrom Wanderer, if your opponents have no blockers, you're attacking with Maelstrom Wanderer, you're attacking with Godo, you're attacking with Batterskull. Godo is going to trigger and untap himself. So that's 4 plus 3 plus 7, which is 14. And then Godo and Batterskull, because Batterskull has Vigilance, are going to be able to attack it again for another 7, dealing 21 points of damage. So if you cascade into it all by itself, it's going to deal 21, which is obviously sweet. It's a one-hit kill. But also, just Godo and Batterskull together are going to be able to deal 14 damage all on their own and gain you 8 life, which is also very sweet. So the main idea behind Godo is that it picks up a resilient threat for you against removal heavy decks, and it also gives you some much needed life gain. Next is Inferno Titan for 4 red. It's a giant. It's a 6/6, and its static ability is pay red. Inferno Titan gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Just good old classic fire breathing. And when Inferno Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage divided as you choose among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures and or players. So Inferno Titan is very good against small creature decks. You get to do something very similar to Dragon Lord of Tarka and just start sweeping creatures out of the way. It also attacks for a lot if your opponent has fetched once uh, and you cascade into Maelstrom Wanderer Inferno Titan, and they have no blockers, no interaction. You're going to deal 3 to them when Inferno Titan comes into play, deal 3 when it attacks, and then, so that's 6, plus 6 more from the Inferno Titan is 12, plus 7 more from Maelstrom Wanderer is 19. So that's a ton of damage as well. Jace Vryn's Prodigy for 1 and a blue is a legendary creature human wizard that has the ability draw a card, then discard a card. If there are 5 or more cards in your graveyard, exile Jace's Vryn Prodigy, then return him to the battlefield transformed under his owner's control. And it's an 0/2. The flip side is Jace Telepath Unbound. It's a 5 loyalty planeswalker whose abilities are +1 up to 1 target creature gets -2/-0 until your next turn, so a little bit of protection on itself. -3, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that card would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. And -9, you get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, target opponent puts the top 5 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So mostly this is a nice looter early game that will allow you to filter your draws a little bit, but then later on you can start flashing back important instant and sorceries in your graveyard. just very powerful. The ultimate's not super relevant. Mill isn't a very reliable win condition in this format with Eldrazi floating around here and there. So another important thing to note is that because Maelstrom Wanderer gives all creatures haste, if you're cascading into Jace, you're going to be able to flip it immediately if there are 4 or more cards in your graveyard by activating Jace. So another nice upside. Then we have Oracle Moldiah for 3 and a green. It's an elf shaman for that is a 2/2, and it has the abilities you may play an additional land on each of your turns, play with the top card of your library revealed, and you may play the top card of your library if it's a land card. The most direct comparison for me between this card and any other card in the game is green Jace the Mind Sculptor. And it is honestly that powerful. If you're hitting lands off the top to a turn with Oracle, you're drawing so many extra cards essentially. It is extremely powerful, and it plays nicely with some other effects in the deck. Jace the Mind Sculptor itself allows you to put 2 lands back on top and then play them with Oracle. That's sweet. And there are a few other things. Shuffle effects are good with Oracle and such, but it's just a very nice value creature to have in the deck. Next we have Primeval Titan, which isn't the most powerful Titan in this deck because you're not really getting a ton of sweet utility lands very often. It honestly just allows you to go straight from 6 to 8 immediately, which is very nice for your commander. It also mana fixes if that's necessary, but there aren't a whole lot of utility lands in the deck. There are, other than your normal mana base, you have the temples, which are scrylands, and you have a bunch of sacrifice for 2 mana lands to kind of accelerate the game plan. So in general, Primeval Titan is not getting a lot of utility. It's just about ramping. Along that same token, Sakura Tribe Elder, just another 2-cost accelerant in the deck. It has the ability, for 1 and a green, it's a 1/1 that has the ability sacrifice Sakura Tribe Elder, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library. Important trick to know with this card is that you can play it, declare a block with it, and then before damage, sacrifice it so that your block has been declared. You won't take any damage from the block unless they have trample, and then you also still get the land out of the card. So just very nice. Thragtusk, 4 green for a 5/3 beast. When Thragtusk enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life. When Thragtusk leaves the battlefield, put a 3/3 green beast token onto the battlefield. Just an early speed bump for the aggressive decks that gains you some life. Just very straightforward. And then the 6th Titan, as it is nicknamed, Wormcoil Engine, 6 cost, 6/6 with Death Touch and Lifelink. When Wormcoil Engine dies, create a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with Death Touch and another one with Lifelink. So it's just another source of life gain and a fairly resilient threat overall. More along the lines of threats, we have some Planeswalkers, 5. We have Chandra, the Flamecaller, for 4 red. It's a 4 loyalty Planeswalker with +1, put 2 3/1 red elemental creature tokens with haste on the battlefield. Exile them at the beginning of your next end step. 0, discard all cards in your hand, then draw that many cards +1. And -X, Chandra Flamecaller deals X damage to each creature. It's a win con. It allows you to dig if it's necessary, and it's also a wrath. It's just basically everything you want in a single card in this style of deck. So it can protect itself by sweeping up small creatures, and then it can pressure the opponent all by itself. Very, very good card. Chandra, Torch of Defiance, for 2 red, so 4 casting cost Planeswalker with 4 loyalty. +1, exile top card of your library. You may cast that card. If you don't, Chandra Torch of Defiance deals 2 damage to each opponent. Ideally, you'll use that to pick off Planeswalkers if necessary, but obviously it does pressure the opponent a little bit. +1 to add red to your mana pool. That's going to be nice if you play an early Chandra to be able to play your 2 casting cost artifact ramp, even more of it. -3, Chandra Torch of Defiance deals 4 damage to target creature. That's very nice. And you get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to target creature or player. Game-winning emblem. Jace the Mind Sculptor, 2 blue blue, 3 loyalty, +2. Look at top card of target player's library. You may put that card on the bottom of that player's library. 0, draw 3 cards, and put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library. -1, return target creature to its owner's hand. -12, exile all cards from target player's library. Then that player shuffles his or her hand into his or her library. So you get the ability to scry off the top of your deck with it. Scry 1 on your deck for +2. Fate seal your opponent if that is necessary. 0, which is probably the mode you will use the most, and it's extra sweet in Maelstrom Wanderer because zeroing will allow you to put 2 spells on top of your deck that once you cast your Maelstrom Wanderer, you'll be able to cascade into. So you get to set up your cascades and make a ton of mana in theory. Ideally, you put back like a Titan and maybe another Planeswalker or something, and then you just get to cascade into both of them, and that is very sweet. And then the -1 obviously protects Jace and you from opposing creatures. You can, if it is necessary, you can retrigger enter the battlefield abilities on your own creatures by unsummoning them. And the minus is obviously game winning, but comes up so infrequently that it's not really a reason to play the card. Karm Liberated, 7 mana, 6 loyalty planeswalker with +4 target player exiles a card from his or her hand, -3 exile target permanent, and -14 restart the game, leaving in exile on all non-aura permanent cards exiled with Karn Liberated, then put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. Mostly, this is a 7 mana Vindicate, which means that it will get rid of a single permanent. That is mostly what the card does in the deck. Being red, blue, green, you can't deal with very big creatures permanently. You can't really deal with planeswalkers all that well. In this deck, lands can be an issue if they're very good against you. And honestly, you're paying a lot, but you're getting a fairly versatile card out of it. The plus obviously is nice because it gains a lot of loyalty for Karn, and the ultimate is something you should look to not do ever, but it is there if it is extremely necessary. Then we have the only spell that cannot be cascaded in the deck. That's Ugin the Spirit Dragon. For 8 mana, you get a 7 loyalty planeswalker with +2. Ugin the Spirit Dragon deals 3 damage to target creature or player. Great for finishing games off. Great for picking off medium and small sized creatures. -X, exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less. That's 1 or more colors. A great wrath effect. And then -10, you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, then you may put up to 7 permanents from your hand onto the battlefield. So very similar to Chandra Flamecaller. It's a win condition. It protects itself and wraths, and it has a way that this has an ultimate that can win the game. So just a very powerful planeswalker. Next, we'll talk about how we're going to cast all these cards with our mana accelerants. There are all of the artifacts aside from Batterskull are going to help us do that. The first is Basalt Monolith. It's a 3 casting cost artifact that doesn't untap during your untap step, and it has tap, add 3 mana to your mana pool, and pay 3 to untap it. So this is going to allow you to basically store 3 mana from one turn to the next, however you look at it, whether that's when you untap it or when you cast it, and that's nice because it is a lot of mana for its cost. So this on with 4 on turn 4 plus another land on turn 5 is going to single-handedly cast Maelstrom Wanderer, kind of similarly to Thran Dynamo, which I'll go ahead and talk about now. It's a 4 casting cost artifact that taps for 3. They're very similar, obviously. This one just untaps on its own. So they both single-handedly allow you to cast Maelstrom Wanderer with the requisite lands, and that's very nice. They accelerate you basically 4 turns, or 3 turns, sorry, which is very nice in the deck because the deck is mana hungry. you're all about casting your Planeswalker, Batterskull, which we've already discussed, Cold Steel Heart, which is a 2 casting cost artifact that comes into play tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you choose a color, and then it taps to add a mana of the chosen color to your mana pool. So just a 2 casting cost accelerant. Everflowing Chalice, 0 mana cost with multi-kicker of 2, so you can pay 2 as many times as you want when you cast a spell, and then it enters the battlefield with a charge counter for each time it was kicked, and then it adds colorless to your mana pool for each charge counter. So it's a 2 mana accelerant, but later on in the game, if you have more mana to kick multiple times, you can obviously do that, and that's very nice. Felwar Stone, which is a 2 casting cost artifact that taps to add a mana to your mana pool of a color that an opponent's land could produce. So against obviously a red, blue, or green deck, it's going to tap for one of those colors, but otherwise it taps for what is essentially a colorless mana. Firestone, 2 mana cost, 2 casting cost, tap, comes to the battlefield tap, and it taps for a red. It's a red mana rock, Fractured Power Stone, which is 2 casting cost. It taps to add colorless to your mana pool. As a secondary, completely irrelevant ability, Roll the Planar Die, which is used only in Plane Chase, but it does cost 2 and tap for 1, which is what we're looking for. Cruel Signet, which is a 2 casting cost artifact that you can pay 1 mana of any color into to add a red or green to your mana pool. So it's not quite as easy to get mana out of as the mana rocks like Fractured Power Stone and Fire Diamond, but it does fix more. It adds a red and a green. Similarly, we have Izzet Signet, which does the exact same thing. It just adds blue or red. And we also have Simmet Signet, which does the same thing, but adds a blue or a green. So all 3 of these are going to accelerate you 1 mana and are going to fix your mana. Next we have Mind Stone, which is probably the best 2 casting cost artifact in the deck. Cost 2 mana, taps for 1, but later on in the game, if the mana isn't super relevant anymore, you can pay 1, tap and sacrifice Mind Stone and draw a card, so it cycles later on, so that's very nice. Moss Diamond is the green version of Fire Diamond, so it costs 2, comes into battlefield tap, and taps to add a green. Prismatic Lens is a 2 casting cost artifact that taps for a colorless mana, and then you can pay 1 and tap it to add a mana of any color to your mana pool. Most of the time, it's just going to tap for a colorless, but if you are desperate and need the mana fixing, it is there. Sky Diamond is the blue version of Moss and Fire Diamond, and it comes into play tap and taps for a blue. Talisman of Impulse costs 2. It taps for a colorless mana, or you can add a red or green to your mana pool, and it deals 1 damage to you. That fixing, again, generally isn't relevant, just like Prismatic Lens, but it's there if you need it, but mostly it taps for colorless. And then we have Thought Vessel, which costs 2 and taps for a colorless mana, and it also has the ability, you have no maximum hand size. Next, we'll talk about the sorceries. We'll go over the mana accelerants first. We have Farseek, which is for 1 and a green, allows you to search your library for a plains, island, or swamp mountain card and put it onto the battlefield tap. So in this deck, you're going to be choosing island or mountain, but because it doesn't say basic, you can go and get your dual lands like Breeding Pool, Stomping Ground, and Steam Vents, as well as their original dual counterparts, Tropical Island, Volcanic Island, and Taiga. So that's very nice, but other than that, you can obviously get a basic island or a basic mountain. We have Into the North, which is the sole reason we are playing snow-covered basic lands in the deck for 1 and a green. It allows you to search your library for a snow land card and put it onto the battlefield tap. So it's going to allow you to search for a forest, an island, or a mountain. Next we have Nature's Lore, which for 1 and a green allows you to search your library for a forest card and put that card into the battlefield, then shuffle your library. You'll note 2 things. It doesn't say basic forest, so you can grab a basic forest, or you can grab Breeding Pool, Stomping Ground, Taiga, or Tropical Island, as well as a basic forest. And because it doesn't say tapped, it comes into play untapped. So this is kind of nice on, with 3 mana, you can play it and then another 2 casting cost mana accelerant as well, which is nice. Then we have Rampant Growth, which is a 2 casting cost green card that allows you to search your library for a basic land card and put that card onto the battlefield tap. So it's going to allow you to get one of your basic forest, island, or mountains. Search for Tomorrow, which costs 2 and a green, and it says search your library for a basic land card and put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So it will come into play untapped. But ideally, you're going to be using the second ability of this card, which is Suspend 2. So you pay a green, and then you exile it with 2 time counters. At the beginning of your upkeep, you remove a time counter. When you remove the last one, cast it without paying its mana cost. So it allows you to just play another accelerant on turn 1, which is going to allow you to accelerate earlier. Then we have the last 2 casting cost uh, Accelerant, which is 3 visits for 1 and a green. It allows you. It does the exact same thing as Nature's Lore. Search your library for a forest card and put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So it can get the same things: basic forest, stomping ground, breeding pool, taiga, tropical island. It puts into play untapped, so same thing. But you'll notice that this card is kind of expensive for what it does. It's $34, and that is because it is from Portal 3 Kingdoms. So if you're concerned about budget and you don't want to play this card, there are a couple other 2 casting cost artifacts you can look into. The first one that comes into my head is Guardian Idol, so I recommend that one if you're not going to fork out the money for 3 visits. Moving on with our sorceries, we have All is Dust, which is for 7 colorless mana is a tribal sorcery, Eldrazi, and it says each player sacrifices all colored permanents he or she controls. So this is just essentially a gigantic board wipe. Ideally, you cascade into it, you wipe the board, and then your Maelstrom Wanderer comes down on a clean board and starts attacking away. Anger of the Gods, which is one of the cards that I've added to help fight the aggressive metagame. And if for 1 red red, it deals 3 damage to each creature. If a creature dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. Very straightforward red damage based Wrath. Next we have a new card, Baral's Expertise for 3 blue blue. You get a sorcery that allows you to return up to 3 target artifacts and or creatures to their owner's hand. You may cast a card with converted mana cost 4 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So this is essentially just a very nice semi-wrath card that allows you to kind of reset the board, and then you can play obviously you can play another ramp spell off of it. You can cast your Jace the Mind Sculptor, your Chandra, Torch of Defiance. Those were obviously ideally the best ones, but mostly it allows you to kind of wrath and then still play an accelerant, which is nice. Next we have Burning of Jinyi for 4 red red. You get a sorcery that says you destroy 4 lands you control, then target opponent destroys 4 lands he or she controls. Then Burning of Jinyi deals 4 damage to each creature. This is another great one to cascade off of Maelstrom Wanderer because you're going to have a lot of your mana in the form of mana rocks, so you don't really care all that much if lands are being destroyed. And then on top of that, it's going to kill most everything, and your Maelstrom Wanderer is going to come into play and be able to just have free reign on the board. It says it's $60 right here, but don't be fooled. There is a from the Vault version that is $5 to $10, which is much more reasonable. And it is a very powerful card in the deck. Next we have Devastation for 5 red red. It destroys all creatures and all lands, similarly to Burning of Jinyi. If you're cascading into this, Maelstrom Wanderer is still on the stack, so it's going to destroy all the other creatures and all the other lands, and you're not going to really care about that because you're going to have the biggest, baddest creature on the board as a 7/5, and on top of that, you have a lot of mana in artifacts, and those won't be destroyed, so you'll still be able to cast your spells later on. Next, we have Fiery Confluence. For 2 red red, you get to choose 3 modes. Fiery Confluence deals 1 damage to each creature, Fiery Confluence deals 2 damage to each opponent, and destroy target artifact. So you have, at its worst, like 4 mana, deal 3 to each creature, so another sort of Wrath, but you also have the ability to Kill off planeswalkers with the deal 2 damage to each opponent mode, and you can get rid of pesky artifacts with the destroy artifact mode. So it's just a very versatile card. Jockle Hops, same principle as Devastation and Burning of Zinyi. For 4 red, you get a sorcery that destroys all artifacts, creatures, and lands. They can't be regenerated. So this one is going to hit your artifacts, so it could be a little bit more awkward. But Maelstrom Wanderer is gonna, hopefully you'll cascade into it. It's gonna destroy everything, and your Maelstrom Wanderer will just be able to take the game over by itself. Next, we have another type of card that's in the deck, which is the ability to take extra turns. This is Part the Water Veil for 4 blue, and it says take an extra turn after this one, exile Part the Water Veil. And it has Awaken 6 for 6 blue. If you cast this spell for 6 blue, also blue, you also get to put 6 +1/+1 counters on target land you control. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste. So you're not often going to be using the Awaken 6 mode. You just want to cascade into it and kind of hit for 7 with your Maelstrom Wanderer, take another turn, hit for 7, kind of gain an incremental advantage off your planeswalkers if possible, and so on. Then we have Pyroclasm. For 1 red, it deals 2 damage to each creature. Another nod to the aggressive metagame, just another Wrath. Slagstorm, similarly, for 1 blue, you get choose one. Slagstorm deals 3 damage to each creature, so you get another Wrath, or Slagstorm deals 3 damage to each player, which allows you to, again, deal with planeswalkers if necessary. Temporal Manipulation, for 3 blue, you get a 5, obviously 5 mana for a sorcery that says take an extra turn after this one. Important to note, like uh, as it reads the same as Park the Water Veil, it cannot be misdirectioned, unlike the next one that we'll talk about, which is Time Warp, which is 3 blue, target player takes an extra turn after this one. So that is worth noting. Upheaval, which is 4 blue, return all permanents to their owner's hand. Again, very good if you're cascading into it with Maelstrom Wanderer. You're going to bounce everything. You're going to have a 7/5 in play. Resources are going to be even in that no one has really access to any mana, and you're going to have a big old 7/5 in play that's gonna end the game very quickly. Whip Flare for 1 and a red, another nod to the aggressive metagame. Whip Flare deals 2 damage to each non-artifact creature. And then finally Wildfire, which is essentially the exact same thing as Burning of Zinyi. So for 4 red, you get a sorcery that says each player sacrifices 4 lands, which is different than destroy 4 lands, and Wildfire deals 4 damage to each creature. Next, we'll go ahead and talk about the enchantments. They are pretty similar. Imprisoned in the Moon for 2 and a blue, you get enchant creature, land, or planeswalker, and enchanted permanent is a colorless land with tap, add colorless to your mana pool, and loses all other card types and abilities. And Song of Dryad for 2 green, enchant any permanent. Enchanted permanent is a colorless forest land. So these allow you to kind of deal with problem permanents, pretty similar to Karn. They're kind of just like the Vindicates of the deck. They allow you to deal with things that you otherwise can't deal with in red, blue, green. Then we have Instants, same principle, Beast Within, destroy target permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 green beast token. Then we have Kozilek's Return, which is another nod in terms of Wraths. Kozilek's Return deals 2 damage to each creature. Whenever you cast an Eldrazi creature spell with converted mana cost 7 or greater, you may exile Kozilek's Return from your graveyard. If you do, Kozilek's Return deals 5 damage to each creature. That part, completely irrelevant text. We don't have any Eldrazi in the deck, let alone 7 casting cost or greater. It's mostly just an instant speed Wrath that can really blow people out if they are not prepared for it. And then Mystic Confluence for 3 blue. You get an instant that allows you to choose 3 modes, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1, return target creature to its owner's hand, or draw a card. This is the only counter spell we have in the deck, and it's because if you cascade into it, it isn't totally dead. You get to pick modes with return target creature to its owner's hand and draw a card. So at worst, you're just getting a draw 3, or you're bouncing some creatures and drawing cards, and that's also sweet. For the mana base, we have a pretty straightforward one. We have the requisite fetches: 9 Arid Mesa, Bloodstained Mire, Flooded Strand, Misty Rainforest, Polluted Delta, Scalding Tarn, Verdant Catacombs, Windswept Heath, Wooded Foothills. We have the 3 original duels: Volcanic Island, Tropical Island, Taiga, and we have Stomping Grounds, Steam Vents, and Breeding Pool. Then we have the Triland, the wonderful Triland Command Tower. We have the Buddylands, Hinterland Harbor, Rootbound Crag, and Sulphur Falls. And then we have the 3 temples because they're sweet in this deck. You don't have a lot to do on turn 1, so playing a tap land isn't a big deal at all. Also on turn 3, because you have a lot of 2 casting cost accelerants, you can play one of those and a tap land and it won't affect your curve too much, and they're going to allow you to scry 1. So generally, if you're using Primeval Titan to get something, if you want a little bit of value, you can grab the Skylands to help improve your draw step. And then the other type of card we have are uh, some of the sacrifice to gain 2 mana lands. We have Crystal Vein, which comes into play untapped. It's the only one that does, and it taps for a colorless or taps to sacrifice to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Dwarven Ruins, which enters the battlefield taps for a red, or taps to sacrifice to add red to your mana pool. Havenwood Battleground, same templating, comes into play taps for green, tap sack, add green. And then we have Svielunite Temple. It's pretty hard to say, sorry if I messed that up. Comes into play taps for blue, taps to sacrifice for blue. And then we have a copious amount of basic lands, more than usual in 3-color decks because we have a lot of basic land searching in terms of our mana ramp, and they're all snow covered because of Into the North. And I believe that wraps up our mana base. I don't think I forgot anything. So in conclusion, the deck is a rug ramp control deck where you're trying to play a bunch of mana accelerants so that you can cast your Maelstrom Wanderer and just get value off of it. And in the meantime, you have some cheaper than your commander threats like Frost Titan and such. And then you also have some Wraths to try to slow down the aggressive decks to get to the point where you can actually cast your Maelstrom Wanderer. So this deck is going to be very good against mid-range decks because you're going so much bigger than they are. Maelstrom Wanderer is always 3 spells for 1 card. Super resilient to removal because you're often cascading into more mana accelerants, which isn't exciting, but it means that they're going to have to deal with your Maelstrom Wanderer and then you just get to cast it again. And it's going to have pretty good game against aggro with the Wraths and the reasonable amount of life gain between Thragtusk, Wormcoil Engine, Batterskull, and Godo for Batterskull. And uh, you're also going to have a much bigger end game than them. So once you resolve your Maelstrom Wanderer, if you hit any sort of like land destruction Wrath card, they're generally not going to be able to come back at all. Where you will struggle with this deck is against control. It doesn't have a lot of threats. As you can see, we're basically limited to so Sakura Tribe Elder isn't really a threat, and I wouldn't really count Jace Vryn's Prodigy as one, so we're stuck with 8 plus 5, which is 13, plus the Maelstrom Wanderer, which is 14. So those aren't the biggest of threats, and that's going to mean that counter spells are very good against you. They're not necessarily good against Maelstrom Wanderer because Cascade is very good against counter spells, but your pinpoint important threats are going to often get countered. So if your metagame has a ton of control in it, try to shy away from this deck unless you're really set on playing it. And that's just about all I have to say about the deck. Thanks for watching.